Field Hospital 1 to B, Northern France, October 1916. Claire Renaud didn't ask questions when they assigned her to the new post. She packed her kit, wrapped her hands in linen, and boarded the muddy supply wagon headed east. The driver didn't speak the entire ride, just smoked, squinted at the road, and chewed tobacco as if the act of silence held back something worse. The hospital was little more than canvas, mud and timber frames sagging under rain. The stretch of ground was quiet to quiet, she thought. No gunfire nearby, no visible wounded, just the pale grey sprawl of sky pressing low over the rows of tents. A junior orderly greeted her with chapped lips and a stitched eyebrow. He handed her a lamp and said nothing until she asked where to stow her bag. Then you'll be in the rear unit. She followed him through the mess of canvas and cord, past tents that stank of chloroform and iron. The wounded barely looked. Up blank-eyed men, some missing limbs, some teeth, some thoughts. One stared into his soup until the steam faded and the flies came. No one moved to stop them. Claire had served in 2 hospitals already. She had seen infected wounds blacken to the bone. She had watched men die with their mouths open, not in pain but in confusion, like they didn't understand what death was until it was inside them. She had heard sobbing at night, and worse laughter, long after the body had given up. But nothing unnerved her like the final tent. They called it the White Room. It wasn't white, just cleaner, still tucked behind the others. As if someone had tried to forget it was there. The orderly stopped short of the entrance. He said, "You'll be looking after him." Claire frowned, but the boy had already walked off, too fast for the mud inside. There was one bed, one patient, no name above the cot, no chart at the foot. The man lay flat, still covered to the neck in heavy wool. He looked young, maybe 23, pale, thin, blonde hair damp with sweat, though the tent was cold. His face was blank, not peaceful, just empty. The way wax looked before it melted. Claire moved closer. He was breathing slow, steady, mechanical. She touched his wrist, warm, pulse. Strong, she checked the chart tucked under the bed. Blank. She called out to the staff tent, asked for his name. They shrugged. He was brought in 3 weeks ago, one said. Shell shock, maybe gas. But no wounds, no fever. Just that as anyone tried to wake him. Yes, the nurse said. He doesn't. Claire returned to the tent, sat beside the bed. She watched him for hours. He didn't stir. At midnight, she turned the lamp low and read beside him. At 1 in the morning. Something changed. Nothing moved. But the air felt thicker, the kind of thickness you feel in old cellars or inside churches long since abandoned. Her candle sputtered, though there was no wind, and she felt not heard, but felt a small breath at the edge of her mind, not her own. A sigh, she leaned closer. The man's eyes were closed, but something was different. His lips had parted slightly, his throat moved, not a swallow, a murmur. Claire leaned closer, and she heard it. A sound very soft, very slow, like a person humming under their breath, but backwards. She jerked back, almost knocked over the stool, but the man didn't move, didn't blink, just lay there, the same as before. She went to call the other nurse when they returned. The man's mouth was closed, still, silent. The other nurse gave her a look. "You're tired." Claire didn't respond, but she knew what she'd heard. It wasn't sleep, it wasn't delirium, it was listening, and something some part of her she didn't want to name was certain. He had been waiting for her. Field Hospital 1 to B, the White Room, October 1916. Claire stayed through the night. She told herself it was caution, that it was her duty, that she simply wanted to observe his breathing, monitor for signs of fever or fit. But the truth was quieter and stranger. She couldn't bring herself to leave him alone, not because he was helpless, but because it felt wrong to turn her back on him at dawn. She checked him again. Still warm, still breathing, still untouched by decay. 3 weeks without food, they said. 3 weeks without water. But his skin was soft. No sores, no rot. No sign of the bed taking him into it. He hadn't urinated. Not once. Not soiled the bed. Not once. Impossible. She said as much to the doctor. He didn't even look up from his papers. You're not the first to ask. He's not your concern. Just keep him turned and breathing. He doesn't need help breathing. The doctor finally looked at her. No, he doesn't. Then he walked away. That night, the oil lamp in the White Room guttered out 3 times. The canvas walls didn't shift. The flap was secured. But every hour or so, the light would flicker and vanish, leaving her in that pale, moonless dark. Each time, she relit it with shaking fingers, and each time, the shadows in the corners of the tent felt closer. The second night. Claire dreamed, not her own dreams. She dreamed his. She was standing in a trench, alone, not under fire, just still waiting. The mud came up to her ankles. The sky above her was white, but no sun. The air was too quiet. A stillness that held its breath. Ahead, a shape slumped forward. Soldier, uniform torn. Claire moved toward him. Her boots didn't make a sound. When she reached him, he turned around, slowly like something underwater. It was the man from the White Room. His mouth was full of dirt. He looked at her, not with pleading or pain but recognition, and then he said, calmly, "You're already part of it." She woke, gasping, heart racing. The man lay there, same as always, but his lips were slightly parted again. A smear of soil clung to the corner of his mouth. There was no dirt in the room. No one had brought any in. Claire cleaned it off with a cloth, her hand trembling. She checked the bedsheets, checked her own boots. Nothing. Later that morning, she went to change his position as she leaned over him. Something happened. His breath shifted, matched hers, every inhale she took. He mirrored. She stopped, held her breath. He did too. For 15 seconds, they held still, neither breathing, both silent. Then suddenly he exhaled and whispered a sound, barely a syllable. "Claire." She stumbled back. His eyes stayed closed, his body unmoved. But he had said her name. He knew her name. She hadn't told him. No one had. Not in front of him. Not near the tent. She reported it. The staff ignored her. The doctor said, "You're tired. You're imagining things. We all are." But as she walked away, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. The doctor's hands were shaking, and his own shadow, as it moved with him across the grass, shuddered for a split second, like it didn't want to follow. Field Hospital 1 to be October 1916. Near Soissons. Claire stopped sleeping on the 3rd night. It wasn't fear, at least, not the kind she could name. It was vigilance, the kind that comes slowly, like damp creeping into the walls. She found herself listening constantly, waiting for something she couldn't describe. It wasn't for his breath that was always there. Slow and even, it was the moments between. The brief silence after an exhale, before the next inhale, where the world felt thinner. The other nurses had begun avoiding the White Room. They said the patient unsettled them, that the air felt tight in there, that the lamp never stayed lit. Claire didn't blame them, but she stayed, not out of duty anymore, out of fixation. The man hadn't moved, not a twitch, not a shiver, but she began to feel him watching her, even with his eyes shut, even with his face still. She started talking aloud while she worked, not directly to him, never to him but to the silence. Morning, cold today. Someone died in the yellow tent last night. Have you ever seen a man with no eyes? She didn't know why she said that last one. It just came out. That night, she passed a mirror, a shard of broken glass nailed to the back of the supply door. She looked just out of habit, and she saw herself, but her reflection didn't move. It stared at her, unbellowing, expressionless. And behind it, in the dim canvas light, a figure, not a soldier, not alive, standing just beyond her. Shoulder she turned, no one there, but her own breath fogged the glass, and the breath behind it did not. She slept an hour that night, woke gasping, blanket soaked. The man hadn't moved, but his arms were now folded over his chest. She hadn't placed them that way. No one had when she asked the staff. They just shrugged. Maybe she was tired. Maybe it had always been like that. Maybe nothing had changed, but it had. That afternoon, she checked on him again, slowly, carefully, and she saw it. His mouth was mimicking hers. Every time she opened her mouth to speak, even just to yawn, his lips parted the same way, not in sync, just a moment behind, a lag, like a puppeteer getting used to the strings. She moved her arm. He didn't. But when she turned away, she caught it in the corner of her eye. His hand had shifted, open now, fingers curled slightly, palm facing up, as if offering something, or waiting to receive. She approached, slowly, knelt beside the bed. "Who are you?" she whispered. His eyes fluttered, but did not open, and then, behind her on the canvas wall, a voice. Not a breath, not wind, a voice, low, slow, from outside the tent. It said, "He never stopped being a soldier." She turned, heart in her throat, hand clutching the lamp. There was no one there, just the tent wall still silent. She stepped outside, expecting to find someone behind it. Nothing, only mist and footsteps leading into the woods. Only one set barefoot. She followed them 10 paces, 20, and then she saw it, a small pile of objects in the dirt. A ration tin, a medical tag, a rosary, a photograph of her, one she'd never seen before. Her handwriting on the back, 4 words, "You brought him back." Field Hospital 1 to be, the record tent. October 1916, Claire didn't show anyone the photo. She burned it behind the mess tent at dawn, watching the edges curl and blacken, pretending the smoke didn't smell like wet cloth and old skin. The handwriting, on the back, the one that looked like hers, was still burned into her eyes. You brought him back. Back from where? Back how? She returned to the white room later that morning, heart tight, breath shallow. The man hadn't moved, not in the way people move, but something had changed. He lay exactly as before, but now there were creases beneath his eyes, slight ones, like laugh lines. His face had aged overnight, only subtly, but enough to be noticed. She checked his VITALS steady. His skin was warm, too warm, fever warm, but he didn't sweat, and when she pressed the stethoscope to his chest, she didn't hear a heartbeat. She heard a second breath, fainter than the first, almost hidden underneath, as though two things were breathing inside him. She went straight to the records tent. The clerk barely glanced at her as she entered. He had one hand wrapped in gauze and a cigarette stuck to his lower lip. "I need to see the intake reports," Claire said. "Which ones?" "The unidentified soldiers. Last month, shell shock cases." He didn't ask why. He just pointed to a stack of files in a rusting tin box. She searched for over an hour. Finally, she found one. It had no name, only the date, September 2, for no unit. No hometown, just a note scrawled at the bottom in pencil, brought in from trench collapse. No injuries, unconscious, breathing steady, but he came in with another tag. Claire flipped the sheet. Taped to the back was a dog tag, belonging to a man who had died 2 weeks before, confirmed, buried, witnessed by his entire platoon. Yet somehow, this man had come in wearing his tag. She took it to the doctor, demanded an answer. He looked at the tag, then looked at her, and for a long time said nothing. Then, "This is France, 1916. The earth eats men and gives back pieces. Maybe this is one of those pieces." She asked him how many other cases like this had come through. He didn't answer, but when she walked away, she heard him whisper something to the wall. We shouldn't have moved him. That night, she returned to the tent. The man's eyes were open, just slightly, enough to see the whites, not the iris. Not blinking, just open. She froze. He didn't move, didn't breathe faster, but now she was certain. He was not sleeping. She stepped back. The lamp flickered again, then died. Darkness in the silence. She heard it footsteps inside the tent, but not his. Something slower, heavy. She turned. Nothing. But when she turned back, he was sitting upright, mouth open, eyes wide, staring straight ahead, breathing her breath. Again, she backed away. He did not follow, but something did. Not with steps, with presence. And then he spoke, not loud, just one word, closer. She ran. Field Hospital 1 to B, the White Room. October 1916, 3:27 a.m. Claire didn't tell anyone what she saw. If she had, they would have blamed exhaustion. Night duty, isolation, the usual stories nurses whisper to explain when someone walks into the woods and never walks back. But she hadn't walked away. Not yet. She sat outside the White Room for nearly an hour. Her fingers trembled around the edge of her coat. Her breath came in shallow gasps, as if her lungs had forgotten how to draw air that wasn't full of him. He had spoken, he had moved. But more than that, he had wanted her closer. Not help, not comfort, not salvation, just proximity. She could feel it now, pulsing faintly behind the canvas wall. Not footsteps, not breathing. Awareness, the kind that watches you from behind closed eyes and waits at 4:02 a.m. She went back inside. The lamp refused to stay lit. She didn't try it again. She approached the bed slowly. He was lying flat once more, eyes shut, hands folded neatly across his chest. Still, but the air inside the tent felt full, like it had a shape. She stood at the foot of the bed. She didn't speak. She waited, and after several minutes, he exhaled. One long, steady breath, and this time he whispered again. Not her name, not a word, a sound, a voice inside her head, not her ears. "Do you know what it's like to be left behind, inside the mud?" She swallowed hard, to feel the weight of men burying you, while your mind still screams. He didn't move, but she heard more, not from him, from beneath the bed, scratching not, like rats, like fingernails. She dropped to her knees, pulled the cot away from the canvas floor, and there, written in the dirt beneath it, "I never died." Claire staggered back. The cot creaked. She turned. He was sitting up again, but now he looked normal, alive, breathing fast, eyes wide, like a man waking from a nightmare. "Help me," he whispered. It was his voice, not the voice in her mind. Real, hoarse, scared. Double quotes, "Please. I don't know where I am." Claire stepped forward. Everything in her wanted to run, but this was the first sign of consciousness. In weeks, she reached for his wrist. It was cold now, very cold. And then his lips curled into a smile, not warm, not human, just aware. His eyes no longer looked at her. They looked through her. "You brought me back." She pulled her hand away, but his fingers locked around. Hers hard, unyielding. And suddenly she could see it all. The trench collapsing. The silence underground. The hours spent clawing upward. The sound of men walking above him, unaware. The moment he stopped being a man, and something else moved into the space. "You opened the door," the voice said, from both his mouth and the walls. "And now I've remembered what it feels like to wear skin." She screamed, pulled free, fell backward through the flap and into the mud outside. When she looked up, he was standing in the entrance, naked, unblinking, smiling, and behind him, just for a breathless second, another shape, tall, twisting, just out of sight. Something that had never breathed, but had learned how to pretend. Field Hospital 1 to B, 2 days later. Man, if he could still be called, that was no longer in the white room. When Claire returned with 2 orderlies and the head nurse, the cot was empty. The sheets were clean, no footprints, no signs of a body having ever lain there, and no one believed her. "He walked out," she said, but they only gave her soft glances. Sympathetic, pitying, they sent her to sleep in the yellow tent. They said she was tired. Trauma, fatigue. That night, she didn't sleep. No one in the yellow tent did, because sometime around midnight, someone walked through. Not loudly, not even trying to hide, just slow, careful steps, boots caked in dry dirt. One of the only one who hadn't lost her nerve, peeked outside, but she didn't scream. She just sat down and wept. Claire asked her what she saw. Anne whispered he had no eyes, but he looked at me. No one spoke after that. The next morning, 2 patients were missing, both silent types, both recovering, gone. No blood, no noise, just a faint dark line of mud trailing from their beds to the open tent flap. By afternoon, the fog had come, thicker than usual, and it stayed. It didn't burn off with the sun, didn't clear with the wind, just hovered over the camp like a lid. Men wandered wrong. One soldier walked into the medical tent and stood, facing a wall for 4 hours. When asked what he was doing, he said, "I was waiting for it to open." Claire stopped eating, stopped speaking. Mostly, she took her meals behind the record tent, alone. But even there, she wasn't truly alone, because something had begun to hum behind. Her ears like a voice on the edge of hearing. Not loud, not in words, just familiar. It hummed in her breath, in the folds of her coat, in the stillness between footsteps, and it always said the same thing. "You brought him back." She began finding small piles of soil near her bed, clean, almost sifted, placed carefully, like offerings, inside one pile, a tooth dot inside another, a tag with her name on it, inside the third, her own rosary, which she'd buried with her mother the year before. The fog didn't lift. The hospital commander went missing. The radio stopped working. No, more supply wagons came. No one seemed surprised. At dusk, Claire saw him again, the man standing outside. The collapsed latrine, wearing someone else's uniform, too big for him. Smiling, she approached, trembling. "Why are you here?" she asked. His eyes were calm now. They looked human, tired, almost gentle. And he said, softly, "You dug us up." Then he stepped backward into the mist and was gone. The next morning, half the camp was empty. No panic, no struggle, just gone. No bodies, no signs of retreat. Only the fog and the feeling that something enormous was standing just beyond the trees. Claire looked at the white room, still clean, still empty, but now there was a second cot, and on the pillow a folded paper, no handwriting, just a drawing of her own face, eyes shut, mouth open, smiling. Field Hospital 1 to B. What remains. Claire didn't run. She tried, she packed her bag, she wrote a letter. She even stepped outside the wire perimeter one morning, heading for the tree line. But the fog didn't let her pass. It wasn't resistance, it was forgetting. Every time she reached the edge, she'd stop and look around, realizing she didn't know which direction she came from, or where she was going, or even why she had walked there one morning. She found herself standing in the white room, again unaware of how she got there. 2 cots now, one empty dot, one waiting. The paper with her face was gone. In its place, a mirror, not glass, polished, metal, cracked down the center. She looked in, and what she saw wasn't her. Not entirely. The shape was the same. The eyes, the skin, but the expression wasn't hers. It was peaceful, relieved. Done, she backed away. The mirror stayed still, and then, faintly, the reflection smiled. A familiar voice echoed. Behind her, low and warm, "You were always going to give it up." Claire turned. The man was there, standing in the corner of the tent. Only he wasn't young anymore. His face had changed, grown. It wore something of every man she had nursed, every name, every wound. He wasn't pretending to be alive. He was learning how dot one face at a time. He walked toward her, slow hands folded behind his back. No threat, no cruelty, only certainty. "You carried memory. That's all we needed. Now we know how to wear the world again." She tried to speak, but her mouth didn't move. She looked down at her hands. They were still, too still. No breath rose in her chest. She reached for the cot, for the edge of anything real, and she saw it, her own body, lying there. Eyes open, breathing, smiling, but it wasn't her anymore. It turned its head and looked at her and whispered, "Thank you for bringing me home." Claire vanished that day, officially, lost during fog evacuation. No body was found, no grave, no one remembered exactly who she was, but the hospital remained for a few more weeks before it too was abandoned. Years later, hikers found the old wooden sign half buried in the earth. No tents, no beds, just mud, and beside the tree line, a single mirror, still cracked, still reflecting something that didn't quite match, and on the back of it, scratched in something black, "She came to heal the dying." She taught them how to return.